Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? In my last video, I talked about this idea that when I'm a game master, I prefer for my players to refer to their characters in the first person. To say, I enter the doctor's office and look around for antiseptic or other medical supplies, versus Terrence enters the office looking for medical supplies. And he thinks to himself, gosh, I wonder, you get the idea. Now, this seems to be the default setting for a lot of people. In fact, in general, most people you watch play will tend to do this. We'll switch back and forth between first person and third person without really any sort of rhyme or reason. Maybe. My friend Anthony refers to this jokingly as playing in the second person when you're switching like that. Second person, well, that's when you say you, and that's something generally reserved for the game master, but that's something I'd like to talk about another time. Let's stick to the subject here. So it's really kind of interesting, though, to watch people play, to see what I do when I play. What actually happens? What do people actually do? Like I said before, there's certainly people that tend to switch back and forth without any noticeable rhyme or reason. However, in other cases, I've played with people and watched them play where they switch from the first person into the third person, and generally it's to convey more information that wouldn't necessarily be evident to the other players or to the game master or to anybody watching, to convey information in an expedient manner, maybe to convey a whole bunch of information all at once. And it can be really kind of interesting to watch different people play and how they do this. When I played Lamentations in Prussia years ago, you can watch in the very beginning Josh and Lee and Jason begin the session. There's a lot of third-person talk as they're describing who the character is, as they're describing the setup of where they are, why they're in a particular place, what they're doing. This is information they couldn't necessarily convey to me or to the other players without going to some kind of third-person narration. In another example, I play in Call of Cthulhu. I play with Brian Courtmunch, and very often you can watch Brian switch back and forth between first and third person as Albert Smalls. And he role plays Albert Smalls and says I, but then there's times when he goes back into third person and he gives these brilliant descriptions of the mental state of Albert Smalls, his physical condition, what he's doing, what the environment looks like. For me, it's not really jarring at all because, he paints this really vivid picture. It's not necessarily how I would play, but it's really, really entertaining to watch, and he conveys a tremendous amount of information. Yes, I know there are ways and techniques that we can use to try to minimize any sort of third-person talking and to put all these things in the first-person terms. However, there's times when that simply won't happen. I'm generally not a player that will give you a detailed look into the mental state of my character other than describing, what they might look like to somebody else. I start to sweat, or I look concerned, or maybe I'll actually just make my face in that, contort my face up, or I will speak differently. My speech might become pressured or whatever, but I'm still referring to myself in the first person. However, there are times when I slip into some kind of third person and give the other players at the table some more information about my character. Why that is, it depends. Certainly there's times when we state our intention to the game master, to the other players. Terrence, I go into the doctor's office. I'm looking, through the cabinets for antiseptic or anything like that I can use to bandage his wound. Would not say that out loud, but I'm letting the game master know what I'm looking for rather than saying, I look in the cabinet and wait for the game master to say something. Or, is there antiseptic? Are there tissues? Are there cotton balls? So I'm broadcasting my intention. And so that's a look into the head of the character, but it's still done very much in a first-person manner, if you will. There's other times when, I just slip for a moment into giving you the mental state of the character. Well, Terrence really doesn't, or I really don't want to do that. Or, Terrence feels pretty uncomfortable. You can see, and it's a momentary slip into the third person. It's not something I do terribly often as far as I know, but it's a way to convey information that normally is a little hard to convey otherwise. How much this bothers you? Well, it really depends upon your intention for play, what it is you're really looking for, all that sort of thing. My point is it's not always necessarily a bad thing, and it's not necessarily always something that people do unconsciously. Sometimes it's just something we do to convey information we couldn't otherwise convey, or to do it in a very expedient manner to keep things going. So just kind of food for thought. Not exactly a devil's advocate video, but just something I've noticed. And, it's always really cool for me to watch players that are really masterful at doing that back and forth where you hardly even notice. What do you think?